Payment of debt. General rule. Folks v. Beer. A promise to accept less is not binding if unsupported by consideration. Row 2. Payment of debt. Promise to accept less. Reselect Move Ltd. A promise to accept less is not binding if unsupported by consideration, but note bitter comments from Gibson LJ with regards to Willems v. Rafi Bros. Practical benefit to ILR. Row 3. Payment of debt. Promise to accept less. Pinnell's case. Payment of the debt at an earlier time is good consideration and so the promisee is bound. Row 4. Payment of debt. Promise to accept less. Van Bergen v. St. Edmund Properties. Payment of the debt at a different place at the request of the creditor is good consideration and so the promisee is bound. Row 5. Payment of debt. Promise to accept less. Welby v. Drake. Payment of the debt by a third party is good consideration and so the promisee is bound. Row 6. Promissory Estoppel. Origins. Thomas Hughes v. Metropolitan Railway Co. It would inequitable for a landlord to enforce a strict legal obligation if the tenant was led to believe during negotiations that legal right would not be enforced. Row 7. Promissory Estoppel. Denning J. Development. Central Loan and Property Trust Ltd. v. High Trees House. Denning J. O. Bitter dash apostrophe. A promise intended to be binding, intended to be acted on and in fact acted on as binding so far as its terms properly apply. Row 8. Promissory Estoppel. Rules of Promissory Estoppel. Woodhouse v. Nigerian Produce. The promise made is to waive existing contractual rights either expressly or conduct that implies the promise and the promise must be clear. Row 9. Promissory Estoppel. Rules of Promissory Estoppel. A J. V. Briscoe. The promisee must their position in reliance on the promisee. Row 10. Promissory Estoppel. Rules of Promissory Estoppel. The post-chaser. The change in position need not be to the detriment of the promisee. Row 11. Promissory Estoppel. Rules of Promissory Estoppel. The post-chaser. It must be inequitable for the promiser to go back on their promise. Row 12. Promissory Estoppel. Rules of Promissory Estoppel. D&C Builders v. Rees. An example of when it is was not inequitable as the promise has not been given freely. Quote, he who seeks equity must come with clean hands. Quote. Row 13. Promissory Estoppel. Rules of Promissory Estoppel. Combe v. Combe. The doctrine can only be used as defense. Left parent must be used as a shield, not a sword. Right parent. Row 14. Promissory Estoppel. Rules of Promissory Estoppel. A J. V. Briscoe. It is presumed that the doctrine suspends the rights of the creditor and they can be resumed on reasonable notice. Row 15. Promissory Estoppel. Rules of Promissory Estoppel. Tool Metal v. Tungsten Electric. It is presumed that the doctrine suspends the rights of the creditor and they can be resumed on reasonable notice.